Today we're going to be looking at a contender for the top spot when it comes to the best bench that you can possibly put in your home gym. Today we're taking a look at the Freak Athlete ABX, and I'm going to be approaching this review in two parts. First, I'm going to be looking at the bench itself without any attachments, because for some reason bench ecosystems are a controversial topic in the home gym space. I'm not really sure why. I mean, if you go to a salad bar, you don't have to be mad that there's guacamole on the salad bar. If you don't like guacamole, just don't get the guacamole. You know, you don't have to be mad that there's attachments available for benches. If you don't want the attachments, just don't get the attachments. But anyway, so we're gonna look at the bench itself, and then we're gonna talk about the attachments after that. Quick shout out to Freak Athlete for sending the ABX for review, and I do have an affiliate link down in the description. So if you want to help out the channel and you're interested in this bench, consider using that link, which helps out the channel at no additional cost to you. Diving in, this bench uses a ladder style adjustment for the back pad, and since the pre-production model, they did add additional angles that you can adjust it to. So it goes from flat all the way up to 85 degrees. The first incline step is 15 degrees, and then it goes up in 7.5 degree increments. All the way up to 75, and then the last jump is a 10-degree jump from 75 to 85. And since there's the half jumps versus most benches going in 15-degree jumps, you have roughly double the amount of angle options versus a typical bench. And since it uses a ladder style adjustment, it is very quick to adjust, and the seat uses a pop pin style adjustment and goes from flat to 40 in 10-degree jumps. And I'm glad to see that they made this change from the prototype, because the prototype I believe only went up to 20 degrees. And so this is a big step up and is going to prevent you from sliding off the front when you're doing inclined exercises. And a cool little touch on the ladder itself, you'll notice that in addition to the laser cut angle numbers, you'll see that there's call outs for each attachment. And so rather than having to remember or guess where the ladder needs to be adjusted to for each attachment, you can just quickly look down and see LD for leg development. Boom. Oh, you want to do the sit-up attachment. Boom. You want to do the dip handle. Boom. And one thing that you may or may not have already noticed, depending on how much attention you are paying, one of the defining features of the ABX is Freak Athlete's patented automatic zero gap feature. So you'll notice the seat slides in and out as you adjust the bench to close the gap. And then no matter what angle you have the seat adjusted to, you can see that it keeps that gap nice and tight. And this isn't the first zero gap bench, but the defining feature is the fact that it's automatic. Rep has the AB 5000 zero gap, which I actually almost considered purchasing whenever I first started building my home gym back in 2020. However, I ultimately decided against buying it because, like most people, I'm always pressed for time when I'm trying to get a workout in, and I didn't want to have to slide the seat back and forth on the slider and have one additional step that I have to do every single time I adjust my bench. And this way, I don't even have to think about it. I just put the setting that I want, and it automatically does its job to close the gap. This is a relatively compact bench. It is 51 inches long. The seat pad is 13.5 inches. The back pad is 23.5 inches, and the head pad is 14 inches. The width of the bench is 12 inches. It's 17 inches to the top of the pad, so that keeps it in line with powerlifting specs. And the pad thickness is 2.5 inches. And this pad is one of the firmer pads that I have used, so just keep that in mind depending on your personal preferences if you want a firmer or a softer pad. And the vinyl is extremely grippy. As a powerlifter, I use a ton of leg drive when I'm benching, and I've never slipped a single time when benching even an inch. And I love the color scheme that they've decided to go with here. They're going with a white on black, which I'm a little bit biased, as you can maybe tell by looking at my gym. I am a fan of the white and black contrast look. And one thing that's pretty cool that you may or may not be able to tell in the camera is that the black powder coat has a little bit of sparkle added into the powder coat, and it actually looks pretty cool. The next feature for this bench that is a standout feature is the folding head pad. And Freak Athlete isn't the only company that has a folding head pad design. However, as far as I understand, they do own the patent for this folding head pad, and that just hasn't stopped other companies from using the design. The one thing that is different about this design is that most of them use a little pop pin that lets the head pad fold down and then it pops back in, which is faster. However, it's only supported on one side, and the mechanism usually just does not feel very robust, which is important because one of the exercises that this is going to allow you to do is rows. And if you're a strong individual and a heavier individual and you're doing heavy rows, I want to make sure that the pad that I'm leaning against is going to hold me up. And you can see that this is a very beefy and robust support underneath, and then it has this pin that slots all the way through both sides and all the way through the tube so that it is completely supported underneath you. And of course that does have the drawback of you have a pin that comes out and slots back in, so I mean you technically could potentially lose this, I guess, and it takes an extra like 0.2 seconds to adjust. But that's a trade-off that I'm willing to make. And there are 3 settings that you can adjust to. And one little hack that I learned early on is instead of slotting it all the way through, you can actually just put the pin in underneath, which gives you 3 half adjustments for a total of 6 adjustments. You can simply pull the pin and adjust the head pad down all of the way to get it out of the way so that you can do exercises like overhead presses and overhead tricep extensions. And using the chest support unlocks exercises like chest supported rows, chest supported rear delt flies, or single arm bicep preacher curls. And there's actually 2 different ways that you can use the chest pad. The intended way is to stand off the back of the bench and lean forward. However, one way that I actually like to use it most often is to lean forward on the bench and lean off the back. And one note that I do want to mention here as a little bit of a drawback is if you are using dumbbells, depending on what size dumbbells you're using and how long your arms are, for me I have 6 3.5 gangly monkey arms, as I've mentioned on the channel plenty of times in the past. And so if I'm using dumbbells, I do hit the ladder a little bit. It's not the fault of the ABX, it's just the fact that, hey, physics, you have to have some sort of support underneath the bench. You can't float in midair. And so because there is going to be a support post there, no matter what the bench is, you potentially can hit that ladder depending on how long your arms are. It's not so much a big deal if you're doing barbell rows because you can adjust yourself so that with the height of a plate, you can only go down so far and it's not going to hit the ladder. Another piece of good news is that the crack is very minimal. You can see that it's nice and tight. There's not really much of a bevel here. And when you're benching, you really don't notice it very much, if at all. And for me, I am a particularly OCD individual, as my wife will tell you. And really, this does not bother me when I'm benching. And I haven't even thought about it. I only thought about it because I was sitting down typing out what I was going to talk about in this video this morning and realized, oh yeah, I need to talk about this crack. So the fact that I actually forgot that it was even there is probably a good sign for some of you out there who might be OCD like me. The bench is relatively easy to maneuver. It has a nice knurled handle on the front, and the wheels engage when you have the bench lifted only a couple inches off the ground. You can see that it's already rolling around here. That's probably about 4 inches, I guess. So you don't have to hoist it way up in the air to get it to start moving. And the felt weight when you are maneuvering the bench is 44.5 pounds. So it's a little bit heavier than the prototype version. However, it's still not terribly bad and you can maneuver it fairly easy, even if you're not a super experienced lifter. And then when you are done using it, you can store this thing vertically. So if you're tight on space and you want to store this against the wall, you can. And they have a nice Freak Athlete logo to display when you have it stored up against the wall. The Freak Athlete ABX clocks in at $600, or more accurately, $599.99, which puts it pretty much smack dab average for an entry in the premium tier of benches. And the Freak Athlete ABX is an exceptional bench, even if you're not considering the attachment. So if you're only in the market for a bench, this is a very worthy contender. And then if you are even possibly considering maybe that sometime in the future, I might want to get an attachment, well then obviously you're gonna wanna get a bench that has that capability. And in my mind, the only two that you should even be looking at are this, or perhaps the Tib Bar Guy Apex bench. And if you're interested in seeing more content just like this, consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell so that you don't miss any videos. And as a reviewer who's constantly cycling through equipment and having to get rid of equipment to make sure that I have room for new equipment to review, the best compliment that I can possibly give to a piece of equipment is if it stays in my gym after I'm done reviewing it. And one thing that I can confidently say is I have no plans for the foreseeable future to get rid of the ABX. Of course, you can never say never when you review equipment, but this is going to be sticking around as my daily driver for the foreseeable future. And then there's the attachments. The Freak Athlete ABX has a 1.75 by 1.75 inch attachment port that comes off the back of the bench. The reason why that number is important is because that is the same attachment port size as the Iron Master bench, who definitely has the biggest catalog of attachments out of anyone. So not only do you have access to the Freak Athlete attachments that we'll talk about in a moment, but you have access to most of the Iron Master attachments as well. Keeping in mind that since this is a different bench, not every single attachment will work. So do your due diligence and make sure that the attachment that you're getting does for sure work with the ABX before you buy any attachments. Don't hold me responsible for your lack of research. The first of the attachments, the simplest of the attachments, is the humble dip handle. And the cool thing is you have this captive pop pin where you can pull it out, twist it, and it stays out so that you can more easily slot your attachment in. And you give it a little twist, it pops back in, and then you can tighten this little knob down to make sure that your attachment is nice and secure. And with the dip attachment, since you have the post that is the support for the bench, you can use that as a step to step up onto your bench, and bada bing, bada boom, you have dips. And I don't really have a whole lot to say about this. It does dips, which technically I guess you could do some hanging abs here as well. You could do your abs off the back, but that's pretty much it. It's pretty stable. I feel safe when I'm using it, and there's really not much else to say about it. Moving on. Next up, we have the sit-up attachment. As you might guess by where I have this thing stored, I don't use the sit-up attachment all that often since I have to climb Mount Everest to get to it. There are a couple of different ways that you can use the leg attachment. There's holes on both sides, so that way you can slot it in the normal sit-up way, or you can slot it in upside down. If you have it in upside down, you can use this for Nordics, keeping in mind that the pad is a tiny bit on the narrow side, but not too bad. And then if we flip it around, We have it in standard sit-up mode. There is a nice little handle that you can grab onto so that you can get in and out a little bit more easily. There are 2 different adjustment points. You can bring this up if your legs are a little bit shorter. I have it on the longer of the 2 settings. And then we have our decline sit-ups. And this also works as a really good leg roller for your Bulgarian split squats as well. Moving on. Next up, we have one of the 2 attachments that are likely to be your favorite attachment, which is the bicep attachment. If you've ever attached a J-cup, it works pretty much the same way. Slide it in, let it flip down, slot the pin through, bada bing, bada boom. Now you have a support pad for incline curls. This actually does change the incline curl movement quite a bit, because what you can do is you can set the bench back, and then instead of normally what would happen is when you're doing an incline curl, your arms are just hanging straight down. So while your biceps are in a stretched position, there's still no load at the bottom because your arms are straight down. However, when you're leaning back against this, your arms are still out at the bottom position. So there's still tension on my bicep right now at the bottom of the movement. And in case you've been living under a rock for the past few years, the most recent studies have shown that many muscles of the body respond more effectively in the stretched position. So this does unlock the potential for a little bit more bicep growth. And then this does adjust pretty simply. There's a pop pin, so you can adjust the length of the pad. And if you want to use this for preacher curls, you can simply install it the other way, and bing, bang, boom, you have yourself a preacher curl bench. You can also use this attachment for floor presses. Or whatever else your imagination can come up with. And then there's the attachment that seems to be getting the most buzz lately, which is the leg developer. This is relatively easy to install. Make sure you have this on your leg developer setting, and then all you have to do is roll this into place. Pin, tighten it down. This can be a cable-driven system, or it can be a plate-loaded system. You take this little screw knob, slide it through the back, and then you can make sure that this thing is nice and secure with your bench. So when you're attaching this without demonstrating it to someone, it takes maybe 20 seconds to install. And like with any plate-loaded system that doesn't have a cam to distribute the load evenly throughout the entire range of motion, it's not perfectly consistent throughout the entire range, but it's pretty close. They have got the plates at such an angle that right here at the bottom, there is still tension. Like you can see that I'm actually having to do something to move the weight here. So there's some tension at the bottom, but it does drop off a little bit. And throughout the movement, as your legs extend, you can feel that it gets a little bit heavier at the top. And again, drops off a little bit at the bottom. But for a plate-loaded system, again, with no cam, I feel like this is about as close as you can get to having a consistent resistance curve throughout the entire movement. But then, of course, for anyone who has a cable machine available, you should probably just be using this thing with cable resistance instead, because that's gonna give you a much more consistent feel. And if you have a selectorized weight stack specifically, it's gonna save you a lot of time changing weights as well. And when using cables, it is just about a perfect consistency in terms of the resistance curve all the way throughout the range of motion. And one thing that I've been primarily doing with the leg developer is using it with electronic resistance. So that right there is the ticket. If you have a Speediance or a Voltra or anything similar, you can connect this bad boy to an electronic cable machine, and then you have all sorts of fun things that you can do in terms of accentuated eccentrics or things of that nature. Well, yeah, it's nice to have all those attachments, but you still have to have somewhere to store them all. How are you gonna store all those attachments? And that is a fair critique. Now, I feel like that's a complete non-issue with some of the attachments, because the dip handle, you can hang on the wall, you can hang on the rack, it's out of the way. This bicep attachment is so thin that you can just lean it on the wall or hang it on the wall. It's not gonna be an issue whatsoever. And then also, the sit-up attachment is fairly compact as well, and I always have it hanging on the top of my storage upright, and it's never in the way. However, when it comes to an attachment like the leg developer, this obviously does take up quite a bit more space. And if you have a teeny tiny microscopic setup, like you're having a dual purpose bedroom / gym, and it's already a small room to start with, then that's fair. You might not have room for an attachment like this. Or if you have a very large setup, then there might not be any point in having an attachment, because you could just purchase a standalone leg extension, leg curl machine and then not have to worry about attaching it to anything. But I feel like there's a pretty wide sweet spot in between those two extremes where this does make sense, because it is quite a bit smaller than a standalone leg extension leg curl. For example, the Titan leg extension leg curl unit that I used to have in the basement was 42 inches wide and 36 inches deep. Whereas this leg developer is 21.5 inches wide and 26 inches deep. So the Titan standalone is about 3 times the size as this leg developer. And you have to have enough room to actually use the machine. So you actually have to have more space than that. Whereas with this, you really just have to have enough space to store it. And you can pull it out into the middle of the room and attach it to your bench when you're using it. And so for me, I don't have the space for a standalone leg extension leg curl. However, I do have enough space to store a leg developer attachment. And speaking of storage, it's relatively easy. All you have to do is separate it from the bench, grab a hold of these handles, and wheel it away. So as you can see, I have the space to store it, but not necessarily the space for a standalone leg extension leg curl. And speaking of leaving this thing in storage mode, if you do have small kiddos around like me, rest assured that this thing is stable. It's not gonna fall over if you have a little toddler that's pulling on it or something like that. If you bump into this or pull on this, it's not really going anywhere. You can see if I give it a pretty good kick, it's not really going anywhere. And the leg developer does come with these 2 handles that attach to the frame of the bench so that you have something to hold on to when you're doing your lying hamstring curls, and they attach like so. However, if you have ginormous monkey arms like me, I didn't really find any need to attach the handles, because I just hang on to the front handle of the bench whenever I'm doing my lying hamstring curls. The dip attachment is 80 bucks. The sit-up attachment is 120 bucks. The bicep attachment is 200 bucks, and the leg developer is 400 bucks. And that's the other advantage to having attachments versus having standalone pieces, because while they do still cost a pretty penny, they are cheaper than if you were to buy a standalone leg extension leg curl, a standalone preacher curl machine, a standalone sit-up bench. And if you want to purchase anything that I mentioned in this video, again, there's a link down in the description that will help out the channel if you use it at no additional cost to you. But let me know down in the comments, what is your favorite bench ecosystem right now? Or if you're one of the people who hate bench ecosystems and you just want to yell at me, then hey, make sure to use all caps down in the comments below. As always, God bless you and your family, and we'll see you in the next one. And it adjusts the front. Consider subscribing and ringing the notification.